Hello, everybody, and welcome in to episode 83 of the Dorton and Duckett Debate podcast. I am Lucas Dorton. That is not Nick Duckett. There is far, far less hair for that. But back in the college days, though, let me tell you, the mullet was it was pretty elite. It was an elite one. It was an elite one. So, but nonetheless, we're excited here. Caleb Sipe, once again, thank you for joining.
Oh, absolutely. It's always a pleasure. However many years we've been doing this, even back when we had whatever we called our old podcast back in college. Always love mock draft season.
That's right. I don't even remember what we called it. That's a yeah. I'll have to dig into the depths to find that one. That's right. That's right. Nonetheless, though, folks, yeah, great time. If you've been watching for a little bit, you know, Caleb, this is, however many times he's been here, like he said. And favorite time of the year. I have always said that the NFL draft um is my favorite non-live sporting event. Just the drama that goes into it, the excitement and the anticipation. Last year I didn't get that. My team forfeited their first round pick. So I had to sit and watch and still was into it, but definitely not the same. Um, but anywho, we're gonna dive into it, folks. Similar to years past, Caleb and I will go pick by pick who we think is going to get drafted where. Now, we didn't do any trades in our mock drafts, or else this could be a 8-hour show. But what we will do is when we get to a pick to where we think has a chance of getting traded, we'll be sure to mention it then for that. But anywho, without further ado, 2024 NFL draft on the clock. Pick number 1, Chicago Bears, Caleb. Is another Caleb getting drafted number 1 overall, or are we seeing a shock here?
I don't think there's any shock here. This would be one of the biggest surprises in draft history if they take anyone other than Caleb Williams. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't think of anything more shocking. Like, it's pretty clear cut. It's been clear cut pretty much the entire season that, and even last season too, that whoever had the first round pick in this 2024 draft, it was Caleb Williams. So I think, hey, he's what is it? He won the Heisman, the Maxwell, the Walter Camp Award in 2022. It's hard to follow that up because everyone's expecting you to just do better than you did last year. It doesn't matter how you do compared to everyone else. If you don't beat what you did the previous year, you're probably not going to win that award a second time. Um, and he did take a little bit of a step back. He threw for 4,500 yards in 2022, 3,600 in 2023. Passing touchdowns dropped from 42 to 30, but they also were playing some teams where you could just throw the backups in there once you got to the second half.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. I guess my there's not a lot that we need to talk about with Caleb Williams. I mean, what can we say that already hasn't been said about him? But I guess my big question for you is the big thing that people have talked about is the personality that is Caleb Williams, the supposed I want ownership stake in the team, crying after the losing games, the fingernail painting with expletives on there. Um, so,
Wearing a dress.
yeah, yep. Um, so if you are the Chicago Bears, does any of that outside stuff like concern you at all, or are you under the mindset of, listen, we've never had a quarterback throw for 4,000 yards in a season, and this guy is unbelievable. I don't care what he does as long as he's staying out of trouble. Come win us some games. I'm assuming that's how most people are operating, including yourself.
I think so. I mean, it kind of reminds me of David Beckham when he came to the MLS. Like, he kind of had that same, like, he didn't care what anyone thought of him. He was just going to wear whatever he wanted, including some almost dresses. That's what happens when you're dating a Spice Girl or married to a Spice Girl at that point. But I think a lot of the people that are making a big deal out of that are the people who will never sniff a job in a front office. So, I mean, it's funny to make fun of little things like that. But at the end of the day, I can't think of a better quarterback that the Bears have had. I mean, best passer since what, Jay Cutler, and that's where the bar is at.
Right. Yeah, a couple of mid years with Kyle Orton. Yeah,
And don't get me wrong, Justin Fields got a lot more hate than he deserved.
100%.
But
Yep.
as a quarterback, as a true passer, he's nowhere near what Caleb Williams is.
Right. Right. Um, 6'1" doesn't concern you at all.
No,
Yeah, me either. Me
I mean
either.
we've seen him play.
Exactly. Yep, I agree. I know that there's people out there that are gonna find any reason to not, oh, this is a bad pick, this is a bad pick. Give me a break. Like you said when we
It's a no
first
brainer.
started, this guy has been the number one overall pick since last college football season. Um, so I think it's gonna be great. I think Chicago, already having DJ Moore there last year and bringing in Keenan Allen and DeAndre Swift. I think they signed Gerald Everett too. I mean, here you go. Like, we're giving you now again. Those guys are a little bit older, running backs, whatever, but still, best talent that the Chicago Bears roster have had on offense in a long time. But Caleb Williams should be good. Should be
Oh
good.
yeah.
But now, moving over to pick number 2, we have the Washington Commanders. Um, I would be willing to bet another quarterback comes off the board here. The question is who, though, Caleb? Who are the Commanders picking at 2?
I could see them going with either Drake May or Jaden Daniels. I did not have them going with Drake May just because to me that would trigger a lot of trades because I just can't see Jaden Daniels fitting in with Bill Belichick. So I think at that point, then the Vikings are trading into number 3. So really, they still might trade into number 3 regardless. But I think Washington, this is the first option to like take somebody like first time we have a question. But I think ultimately, if they want to go best quarterback available, you got to go with Jaden Daniels. He had a phenomenal freshman year, throwing for almost 3,000 yards, 20 total touchdowns, and only 2 interceptions. Um, he had a rough 2020, 2021, where he threw for only 15 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. It was shaky, but then as soon as he got to LSU in 2022, he threw for almost 3,000 yards again, 28 total touchdowns to only 3 interceptions. And then just what he did this year, throwing for almost 4,000 yards, 40 passing touchdowns, 10 rushing touchdowns, over 1,100 rushing yards, winning the Heisman, the Walter Camp, the Davey O'Brien Award. It, the resume is there that one could make an argument that he's up there with Caleb Williams, but I think he's a very solid number 2 quarterback prospect in this draft. And Washington would probably be a fool to take anyone other than Jaden Daniels. Uh, I'm not super high on Drake May. I just don't see him. I see it as Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels gap.
Yep. Yep. I'm with you. I also have Washington going Jaden Daniels here. I think the betting odds favorite of him to go 2 was like minus 700 or something like that. So it's like pretty locked in. Schefter pretty much came out and said the other day, you might as well start getting your Jaden Daniels jerseys if you're a Washington fan. Um, so I think that's pretty good there. Again, talk about dual threat guys. Boy, can this guy do it. Only player in FBS history with 12,000 passing yards and 3,000 rushing yards as well too. Um, so he can sling the rock as well as run it. Now, a little coincidental, a lot of comps that I've been seeing to him is RG3. So hopefully he has a better tenure for Washington than RG3 did. Obviously, a little injury riddled and having Jay Gruden as your head coach isn't always a recipe for success on that. But
Yeah. And I think the groundwork too has been laid for a guy like that to succeed now with what Lamar Jackson was able to do.
mhm,
He kind of was in that same boat early on in his career where he was a slighter build and would take hits and was a little injury prone at times, but then I don't remember what year it was, but there was that one off season where we just started seeing pictures in like June, July, and he was just absolutely jacked and hasn't really had the same injury issues anymore. Knows when to go down when running, and I think whoever he worked with, if they can work with Jaden Daniels, that's going to be deadly.
Mhm. Yep. Yep. I would agree. Having Terry McLaurin there, Jahan Dotson, good guys to throw to. Eckler in the backfield, and I believe has signed a couple offensive linemen too. So, like you mentioned, much better situation than some Washington teams we've seen in the past for sure. Uh, Pick number 3 here is the New England Patriots. We have now exited the Belichick regime now, and we are going into the new regime here, Gerard Mayo. I think it is possible. I think a trade could happen here. A lot of rumors is the Vikings is kind of the main one that I've seen. I've seen Denver potentially. Um, those are kind of the main ones that I have seen personally. Maybe the Raiders, but I don't know about that. But I think the Vikings that's the most likely trade in here. But assuming this doesn't happen, Patriots at 3. Again, I think quarterback has to be the move for them. They have such an inept offense. They have so many parts that they need help with. Um, but I think the next best available quarterback out there of the ones that have been taken is Drake May, North Carolina. Apparently, the night before his New England visit, they took him out for steak dinner, and rumors are they were in love. Like he had an outstanding time and really wowed him. So I have Drake May going 3 to New England. What are your thoughts?
Well, my first thought is I'm going to rescind my previous statement about Jaden Daniels and Bill Belichick not getting along because that is a moot point. It's been a long day. That is a moot point.
It's all right.
So, but he's not going to be there for New England. Hate to break it to him, but Drake May, great fit, 6'4", 230 pounds, nice, sturdy, tall quarterback. His stats did take a little bit of a step back in 2023 from 2022, but that's to be expected when you lose Josh Downs to the NFL draft, and then the NCAA held out Tez Walker for the first 4 games, which
Dumb. That was so dumb.
and those are usually the games where you can rack up a little bit of stats.
Yep.
Um,
Playing the bum teams.
they did play Minnesota early on, and I think he still threw for 4 touchdowns and like 300 plus yards, but
Yeah.
yep. But yeah, he went from 4,321 yards in 2022 to still 3,600 passing yards in 23. Not bad at all. Um, and he can move a little bit on his feet. In the past 2 years combined, he had over 1,000 yards rushing and 16 touchdowns in the past 2 years on the ground. So that's nice when your quarterback can run without that being a part of his identity, is being a rushing quarterback.
Mhm. Yep, I agree. I agree. Like you mentioned, I think the big concern was, he definitely lost pieces. But I think given the pieces that he did have, made the best of the situation that was there. Um, Pro family, obviously brother had one of the most iconic shots in NCAA March Madness history, and Luke May, and then his brother, a pitcher for the Florida Gators, and I believe parents both D1 athletes in North Carolina. Grandpa played in North Carolina, so uh, he has been around elite talent and will know how to carry himself. So that's certainly huge. And everyone always brings up the Patriot way. Um, Drake May, I think, would definitely fit that for sure. So I don't think the Patriots will be outstanding this next year by any means, but they can get their
No.
guy. Hopefully, get some other offensive weapons around him to help. But we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens.
And like you said, this is probably going to be a trade.
Right.
And most likely the Vikings sitting there with the number 11 and the number 23 pick. That's something that they can package to send to New England. And then New England to take multiple pieces on offense because the Vikings are one piece away on offense. Patriots are one piece away from being one piece away from being one piece away from almost having an offense.
Yep. Yep. I agree. I agree. So we'll see what happens here. But yes, folks, definitely look for a trade. Look for a trade right here at this point. Um, Fourth overall pick, we have the Arizona Cardinals. It sounds like that if a trade is to happen here, it will probably be on draft night for this Arizona Cardinals pick. I think they're kind of holding pat now, but they're going to wait till draft night, I think. We'll see what happens there. But assuming not, um, you gotta go wide receiver, and I think Marvin Harrison Jr. has to be the route for that. I
Yep.
mean, Arizona is they need a little bit of help, not a ton, but they need a little bit of help. And wide receiver is a area that they need pass catching help. I would love to see Marvin Harrison Jr., Maserati Marv paired up with Kyler Murray, see what can happen there. Um, I also saw an interesting theory, and I'll let you get your point two here, talking about the trades. Maybe the Colts have a Marvin Harrison reunion, trade up to 4, and get him. And you know, Colts don't need again, they're not a team that's in dire need of offensive help. They have good offensive weapons, but Chris Ballard, Jim Irsay, they don't always go by what we think's going to happen. They will do something out of left field. So if all of a sudden you see a trade up to 4 and it's the Indianapolis Colts, book it. Marvin Harrison will be an Indianapolis Colt. But anyway, 4 for the Cardinals. Who do you have here?
Yeah, I've also got the 6'3", 209-pound wide receiver out of Ohio State, Marvin Harrison Jr., coming off back-to-back seasons with 1,200 plus yards and 14 touchdowns apiece. And his entry into the NFL has been long awaited since that 2021 Rose Bowl when he caught 3 touchdowns against Utah due to opt-outs. I believe that was Wilson and Olave that opted out. So this little-known prospect steps in and just continues to walk in his father's footsteps. I think number 4 is also, like you've mentioned, that's a big spot to watch for a trade, whether that is the Colts trading up for Marvin Harrison Jr. or one of these quarterback needy teams, such as the Vikings or the Giants or the Raiders, potentially trading up to that number 4 spot to just take JJ McCarthy or potentially whoever they see as the 4th best quarterback. Likely JJ, could be someone else, but if they stay put, Marvin Harrison Jr. makes a lot of sense there.
Yep. Yep. I would agree with that. And I'm glad you mentioned those other teams too. Giants, potential quarterback needy. I don't know. We'll see what happens there. If they decide to roll with Daniel Jones another year or not, I don't know. Coming off an ACL, we'll have to see. But yeah, that would be great. That would be great for Arizona. Yeah, his dad pretty much came out and said the only thing I wish he was more like me is demanding the ball more. And I don't know that he will have a problem with that with his college highlight tape of not needing. I don't think he'll need to demand the ball. I think it'll get thrown his way. Um, so moving on to the 5th overall pick here is the Chargers. Now this is where it starts to get interesting. I think they could go a couple of different routes here. I want to hear what you have to say though at 5 for the Chargers. What do you see happening going on here?
This one also really hinges on what happens at number 4, because if a team does trade up to take JJ McCarthy there, then I could see the Chargers being the ones to take Marvin Harrison Jr. But as much as there's smoke about the Chargers being interested in JJ McCarthy because of his connection with Harbaugh,
Hmm.
it's not happening at this point because there's just too much dead cap involved if they were to try and get rid of Justin Herbert. It would be a dumb move. You'd be downgrading a quarterback. You'd be taking on dead cap to downgrade a quarterback. I don't think there's anything there. I think if Marvin Harrison Jr. is there, that would be a great fit since they just lost Keenan Allen and Mike Williams.
Hmm.
But as it's playing out now, I would say they should take someone like Joe Alt, the offensive tackle from Notre Dame, 6'8", 322 pounds, 2-time first team All-American. And when I was crunching the numbers, because he didn't allow any sacks in 2022, he allowed 2 hurries on 406 pass blocking snaps.
Hmm.
That means on 406 pass blocking snaps, he was only allowing even a hurry on 0.5% of those snaps.
Holy cow.
And it went up slightly in 2023. He only allowed 2 hurries on 368 pass blocking snaps. So it's a difference of 0.49% to 0.54%, which was still by far the best number that I saw for any lineman.
Mhm.
Um, and Trey Pipkins III was tied for the fourth most sacks allowed last year with 9 sacks allowed. You got to think Jim Harbaugh has had teams, I believe, runner up, and I believe also winning the Joe Moore Award for the most outstanding lineman unit in college football. He knows how to build it up front. I think a guy like Joe Alt would be a great piece because you already have is it Rashawn Slater on the other side. So if you slide in Joe Alt on the other side, there you have your bookend tackles for who knows how long.
Mhm. Yeah, so this is where we are going to disagree for the first time tonight. Doesn't happen too often, folks. Doesn't happen too often. Um, so Joe Alt is one of the names, is one of the two routes where I think you could go. Everyone knows if you watched any Jim Harbaugh football, he loves to run the ball, loves to run the ball. Saw it Michigan, Blake Corum had, 10,000 carries a game over at Michigan. So he definitely loves to run the football. To which, if they went Joe Alt here, I wouldn't be shocked. But you're 100% correct. It's all going to hinge on what happens, really, what happens at 3, what happens at 4. Uh, and if Marvin Harrison is there, I can see Marvin Harrison. But I have them actually going wide receiver. My thought process was they don't have any, Herbert doesn't have anyone to throw the football to at this current moment in time. Have lost a lot, as the guys that you mentioned above. Um, so I actually have them going with Rome Odunze from Washington, wide receiver there. Had 1,600 receiving yards, 13 touchdowns. One of the big things about him that they say is pro ready. He has a pro ready frame, sitting at 6'3", 212. Really good vertical. Get down the field and catch the ball well. Sure hands as well. They want to one of his, I guess, downsides with him is they want him to be a little more refined in his route running. But again, you have Jim Harbaugh as your head coach. You have Justin Herbert throwing the ball. I can't imagine that's going to come into hurt them all that often. So I have them going with Roma Dunze for the Chargers at 5. So we shall see what
Love
happens.
that pick.
Pick number 6 here is the New York Giants. Um, Again, another interesting situation. Just so many storylines here, and again, that's why I love the draft. Is your mind can just wander. Now, do they want to have Daniel Jones? Maybe. This is a new brass, and they didn't draft Daniel Jones, so maybe they want someone else. To which I could see them going QB. I am going to say they give him one more year, coming off of an ACL. Let's see what happens. Um, and I think you have to go wide receiver, and so I had them going with Malik Neighbors from LSU. I think with obviously Darren Waller isn't the wide receiver; he's a tight end. But with the disappointment that Darren Waller was last year at the Giants, just being injured so much, a
Let's
wide
not beat up on
receiving.
him too much. He just got divorced today.
I, that is true. You get divorced today.
Kick
Uh,
him while he's down.
well, I'm sure he's going to listen to this podcast and will have a word for me, so I'll cross that bridge when I get there. Um, I think they need help offensively, and again, Saquon being gone now too, going to the rival Philadelphia Eagles. Neighbors isn't the running back, but you're going to want all the offensive help that you can get, and so getting a guy out there that has had a ton of success over there at LSU, 1,500 yards, 14 touchdowns, elite athleticism, elite speed. We'll see what happens, but I have the Giants going neighbors.
I could see it. As I mentioned earlier, I think they're in the market for a quarterback, so I have them going JJ McCarthy from Michigan.
Yeah.
They have a potential out for Daniel Jones's contract next offseason, which would result in them only taking on 22.2 million in dead cap space. I think if you take JJ McCarthy here, that's the perfect situation. You can let him sit for as long as you need to, and then bring him in next year and just let Daniel Jones walk. And we'll see what the quarterback class next year looks like. I just don't. I'm not of the idea of kicking the can down the road, and there will be guys next year. Probably will be, but it'll work successfully for the Packers. Even if you have your guy or you think you have your guy, it's not a bad idea to take flyers on guys even while you have your guy. That's how you end up with guys like Matt Hasselbeck and Mark Brunell being backup quarterbacks for the Packers. That's how you end up having um, Aaron Rodgers just sitting there waiting in the wings. If you take flyers on quarterbacks, chances are you're eventually going to hit before you are sitting there in desperation mode for years, like the Cleveland Browns.
Good point. Very true. Very true. I think the Giants, like you mentioned, a team that could go a few different routes with that. If they went quarterback, that's not something I would be mad at. And kind of for the reason that you mentioned too, the Jordan, like you said, the Jordan Love experiment, um, I think we'll be seeing a lot of teams trying to replicate that. Whether
Yeah.
it works or not, I don't know. But obviously, not every team is going to have an Aaron Rodgers that you're going to be able to sit behind for 3 years either. Um, but nonetheless, we'll see what happens here with the New York Giants at 6. Moving on, Tennessee Titans at 7 here. What do you have the Titans doing here?
Well, since I've still got him available and I don't want him dropping two more picks, I have the Tennessee Titans selecting Rome Odunze, the wide receiver from Washington. Um, One of the things that I thought was outstanding about this past year, yeah, he put up 1,600 yards, 92 catches, 13 touchdowns, but he also did that playing for most of the season with a broken rib and a punctured lung from recovering an onside kick against Arizona at the end of September. And so if he can do that, working with that, I'm just imagining what can he do with Will Levis, who is known for having a cannon of an arm, can air the ball out. I think that would be a great situation for both Odunze and for Levis, and also for what's his nuts? The receiver from Arkansas they took last year. I think Traylon Burks
Yes. Yes.
gets some coverage off of him with a big guy like Odunze, and that's just going to free up that passing attack there in Tennessee. So I think that would be a great move for the Titans.
I have Titans going offensive line. I have them going with Joe Alt. Uh, Obviously, you sung his praises a few picks earlier, but like you said, 6'9", just an absolute unit. But for him being that big, very nimble on his feet, very nimble on his feet for being that size. Likely probably would be protecting Levis's blind side with that too, which the Titans when they were winning the football games and running the ball, Derrick Henry in the backfield. Obviously, it's nice to have Derrick Henry, but he also had some decent offensive linemen ahead of him too, helping out. So I think they got to get back to that. You found your guy, you found your quarterback. This is going to be our dude for the future. Hopefully, let's protect him. Give him the biggest dude in the draft that's very good, and put him out there. So I think that would work great for the Titans. But again, like we see in sports all the time too, we have a new head coach, new regime. Are they going to want to make a splash pick? Are they going to want to make the sexy, wide receiver pick like you mentioned too? And I could see that. I could see it. But I can't have Joe Alt drop anymore and the Titans take
No.
first. Um, so now we have the Atlanta Falcons here at pick number 8. I would guess they keep the pick. Now, obviously, there's the whole potential with the Kirk Cousins situation of them
Well,
maybe losing
that
the
was
pick.
it.
What's that?
The NFL put out a statement at noon-ish today saying that the investigation was not going to be done next.
Okay. Okay. Um, okay. Well, so I guess Falcons, you are keeping pick number 8 here for that. So pick number 8 here. I think there's a few different routes they could go. But I have them going defense. And I'm thinking they're gonna go Byron Murphy, the defensive tackle, defensive lineman from Texas here, with the pick. I think definitely is likely the number one uh D tackle interior defensive lineman here in the draft this year. This is not a interior defensive line heavy draft. There's a lot of really solid edge rushers, a couple decent linebackers, but as far as interior defensive linemen, not a ton. But Byron Murphy is an absolute dog. 6'1", 297 out of Texas. Um, Games are won and lost in the trenches, right? Falcons have Kirk Cousins, they have the quarterback, have the offensive weapons. Let's build up that defense a little bit. Let's put a dog on the defensive line and Byron Murphy. So that's who I have for that.
Yeah, I could see that. I have them going with defensive back, taking Quinyon Mitchell, the corner from Toledo. 6 foot, buck 96. Let's see. Oh, can you hear me right now?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. I just saw your message. So yeah, Quinyon Mitchell, the corner from Toledo, 6 footer, almost 200 pounds, 91.5 PFF grade in 2023. Um, he had a pretty good 2022 as well. He had 70 targets, only allowed 27 catches for 270 yards, 3 touchdowns allowed, and he had 5 picks and only allowed a 34.8 passer rating in 2022. But this past year, he allowed no touchdowns. On 62 targets, he only allowed 27 catches, 290 yards, and only allowed a 51.1 passer rating. Granted, that may be slightly inflated because he is going up against the MAC. Um, but we do see a lot of high scoring games in the MAC. You can always count on Wednesday night MACtion being a high scoring barn burner between Akron and Northern Illinois University. But Quinyon Mitchell is a guy who really started rising up people's boards in pretty much the whole offseason. He's been rising up to where he's now in that conversation for who is the number one corner in this draft. And I think putting him there in Atlanta would be a good step forward into solidifying that defensive secondary there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think D-back definitely makes sense for them too. We'll have to see what Atlanta decides to go with on that one, nonetheless. But I think we both agree defense is the route you have to go. You have the offense, you have the quarterback, have the offensive weapons. Let's go work on this defense now. Let's go work on this defense.
Listen, they went and got Rondale Moore to be wide receiver 3. Like that, as soon as they did that, I figured they're not going to take a wide receiver anymore.
Right. I would
I
agree.
could have seen like an Odunze falling to them there, but no, it wouldn't make any sense.
I would agree. I would agree. Anywho, so moving on, pick number 9, and this is the Bears' actual picks, the Chicago Bears here at 9. Remember, pick number 1 was the Carolina Panthers pick that they traded to get number 1 last year. So pick 9, this is the actual Chicago Bears pick. Could potentially see this getting traded. I don't know that I'd be too surprised if that were to happen, but we already talked about some of the offensive weapons that they have. Gonna have Caleb Williams, Swift, Everett, Keenan Allen, DJ Moore. Why don't we get one more? Let's do Brian Thomas Jr. from LSU. I think it could complement very well with Allen and Moore. Big dude, 6'4", 205, but can run. Is very athletically gifted with that, and very sure hands too. 68 catches, a little over 1,100 yards, and 17 touchdowns this year on the electric LSU offense that they had. Um, so what do you see? What do you see happening here for the Bears? You think they go offense? You think they go defense? Or what happens?
Tory Taylor, punter from Iowa.
Okay, sure, sure. Yep.
No, I agree with you with them taking a wide receiver out of LSU, but I have them taking Malik Neighbors. Um, Pretty much similar speed, I believe. Thomas ran a 4.33. Neighbors ran a 4.35. Almost identical speed. Neighbors is coming off back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, including this past year where he had 1,500 yards, 14 touchdowns, 89 receptions. He led the SEC in receptions the past 2 years, and he owns the LSU career record with 189 receptions, which, when you consider the amount of talent that has come out of LSU, from Dwayne Bowe to Jarvis Landry, Justin Jefferson, the fact that he's the all-time leader in receptions tells me that he's been special for a long time.
Mhm.
And I'm not a fan of the experts that put pro comps for players, because they always go one of two ways. They always try to be over realistic with how the player's career is going to turn out, and they don't nail like their talent. They just nail like, how good is this player going to be? Or they go the other extreme, and it's like, well, this guy reminds me of Justin Jefferson. And so then the expectation there is that this guy's going to be the next Justin Jefferson.
Right.
There's probably not going to be another Justin Jefferson for a little while.
Yeah.
Marvin Harrison Jr., maybe. But having the comparison to Justin Jefferson, I think their styles of play are similar. And so if you can get a guy like that in there in that Chicago offense with Caleb Williams, DeAndre Swift, um, and then you have those two bigger guys with DJ Moore and Keenan Allen. If you can add 6 foot Malik Neighbors, who runs pretty good routes, is explosive, I think that adds just another level to a Chicago Bears passing offense, which is wild to think about because that's not something we ever think about with the Chicago Bears.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, if this was years in the past and they're drafting a wide receiver at 9, this guy's the number one and he's getting 150 targets. That's for sure. But yeah, but no, that would be great to see. That'd be great to see for that offense. See what Williams can do throwing with some elite guys here. But yeah, I think wide receiver could be the play here. Now, Jets at 10. Who do you have the Jets going with? And is it as clear cut as some people might think it is, or is it a little more mysterious? What happens at 10?
This one was a tough one for me because I think there is a very clear cut guy that you should take. But given Aaron Rodgers' history with this position, it does cause me to question, is this actually a valuable position to add to an Aaron Rodgers led offense? But that being said, at the end of the day, Brock Bowers is the most talented tight end we've seen since Kyle Pitts from your Florida Gators. I think putting Brock Bowers in that offense, they've already got receivers. They don't really have the holes. The only reason they're picking this high is because Aaron Rodgers just obliterated his what was it, his Achilles,
Yep.
like
Yep.
8 seconds into his first snap for them.
Mhm.
So I think if you can add Brock Bowers, the two-time Mackey Award winner, two-time All-American, um, he had 56 catches for 714 yards and 6 touchdowns this past year, and he only played in 10 games because of an ankle injury, which does not appear to be a concern in the pre-draft process. So I think some of that too, from what I saw on like college football Twitter, was some of it too was just let him rest, don't rush him back. And so I'm not too concerned about that. Previous 2 years, he had 942 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 882 yards, 13 touchdowns. He's been consistent, and standing at 6'4", 240, he still ran a 4.53 40 at the pro day. Like this guy, you could put him in the slot if you wanted to, which, if I remember correctly, Georgia did put him out as a receiver at times. Um, I think a guy like that can bring a new level to the Jets offense. I just question it because who have they really had? Who has Rodgers really utilized as a tight end other than Jermichael Finley early on? Um,
Robert Tunyon, I guess, for a little bit was reliable
for a little bit.
for him. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, few and far between for sure. Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting one. So I actually also have the Jets going Brock Bowers here. I think they are in a win now. They're in a win now mode. If I I I don't know if this was Rodgers last year. Contractually speaking, I believe it is with the Jets, but um we'll see what happens. Potential to be the last season. And I think
Mhm.
after what happened last year, having the season end it really before it even started, you know they're going to want to go all out. They're going to want to make the big splash. And I think they're going to go Brock Bowers. I think there's been, from what I've been seeing, a lot of smoke with Brock Bowers and the Jets the last few weeks. That's both of those names have been linked together quite a bit. Um, It'll be interesting. I also I dabbled with the thought of going offensive line. I think with how horrendous that offensive line, I mean, has been the last few years, I can't say I would be mad at making that pick. But I so I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm not saying there's a dumb pick. I think a smart pick is you saw what happened 4 plays into your season last year is because the O-line was terrible and wasn't great after that either. But I think if the win now pick, gotta go Brock Bowers. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens there.
Who knows? They could shock everyone, take a quarterback here because they're not going to be picking this high if Aaron Rodgers stays healthy.
And that's a good point. That's something I didn't even think about. Yeah, maybe, maybe.
I doubt it based on the QBs that are off the board, but
Right. I think it like yeah. If for whatever reason like a Drake May was available, then maybe. But
I think more likely we're looking at day two, they take a flyer on a quarterback. Maybe day three, they take like, I don't know, like a
Spencer Rattler or something.
Spencer Rattler, maybe like a Michael Pratt from Tulane, someone along those lines. Yeah.
Hmm. It'll be interesting nonetheless. Now here we go. Background. Minnesota Vikings purple and gold here. Minnesota Vikings have the 11th overall pick. Now, this has probably been the biggest rumor mill of a team using this pick to trade up into the top three, like you kind of mentioned before. Um, Likely Patriots at 3, maybe Cardinals at 4. But we'll have to see. And this is one where I've heard a lot of JJ McCarthy to the Vikings, and I'll let you go second here, give you more time after I talk. Um, I've heard a lot of JJ McCarthy to the Vikings. You know, he had a managerial role at Michigan. He didn't have to do a lot. He didn't have to do a lot. But when he was asked to make a play, he was able to make a play. Um, Coming into a situation having Justin Jefferson and, and at some point healthy TJ Hawkinson, um, that'll be great. That would be absolutely unbelievable for them. So to me, it's going to come down to this. Who do you like more between Drake May and JJ McCarthy if you're the Minnesota Vikings? If you're sold one way or the other, I think will really determine on what happens here. If Drake May is your guy, and again, there's been the rumors of, Josh McCown, assistant coach at Drake May's high school. Oh, well, let's bring in Josh McCown to be our QB coach. Um, if you're in love with Drake May, then they're for sure trading this pick and McCarthy's going somewhere else. If you're if you could live without Drake May and you want to sit, then I think they stay here because unless another team trades up, I think most of the teams that desperately need a quarterback, maybe minus the Broncos, who have a pick right after them, have already been picked. So I think this is the last spot, potentially the second to last spot, where we're going to see a quarterback taken in the first round. Anyways, that long spiel. I have Vikings going JJ McCarthy at 11. Mr. Sipe, let's hear it.
Uh, yeah, like you mentioned, JJ McCarthy was essentially a game manager for most of his time there. He had, I believe, like one good game against a good opponent, and that was one of the Ohio State years where he was dropping dimes. Outside of that, he is the reason that we had to watch TCU get absolutely throttled in that championship game.
Yeah.
He is a game manager, though. He only threw 5 interceptions in 2022, 4 interceptions in 2023. Just those ones against TCU were a little costly. But he still hasn't thrown for over 3,000 yards. Not super concerning. He's thrown for 22 touchdowns apiece in each of the past 2 years. I mean, if we were making up this podcast in the late 90s, we would have said the same thing about Tom Brady. He doesn't have those numbers that pop off the page. I don't think JJ McCarthy is Tom Brady. I'm not
Right.
sold on JJ McCarthy.
Right.
I wouldn't be upset if we end up with JJ McCarthy, but since I have JJ McCarthy already off the board to the Giants, it feels too early to take a quarterback of the quarterbacks that are left. So I have the Vikings going with Dallas Turner, the edge rusher from Alabama, 6'3", 247 pounds, ran a 4.46 40. That's not bad when you have an edge rusher running faster than Brock Bowers, tight end. He had 30. So he had 30 tackles, 10 TFLs, 8.5 sacks, and 21. 37 tackles, 8 TFLs, 4 sacks, and 22. And then this past year, he had 53 tackles, 14.5 TFLs, 10 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, was an All-American and SEC Co-Defensive Player of the Year. We need some help with our pass rush. After letting Danielle Hunter walk to Houston, who, by the way, sick jerseys, he's going to look good in those. But right now, our top pass rusher is probably Jonathan Grenard, also from Houston. I think adding a guy like Dallas Turner gives us a solid 1-2 punch off the edges and really allows us to work on building up our defense. And then we'll get to quarterback later because we're really just one piece away on offense. And Sam Darnold is not that piece.
No, he is not. No, he is not. Yeah, that's interesting. I think like I said, I would be willing to bet money that the Vikings do trade up into the top three and go and snag Drake May. That would be my guess.
Yeah.
But again, at the end of the day, they got to ask themselves, do they want the game manager who knows can get the job done, can make the plays when asked? It won't need to do more. Or do you want Drake May? We saw what he did when he had elite wide receiving talent. You give him Jefferson and
Oh.
Oxford. I mean, holy cow. That would be great. So I'll be interested to see what they have here, what they end up going with, but should be interesting nonetheless. Now, pick number 12 here is the Denver Broncos. What do you have Denver going with at 12?
Based on what I said, quarterbacks already off the board, I would see them in this scenario probably just running with Zach Wilson, Jarrett Stidham. Those are the kind of QBs Sean Payton liked. I still don't know why he benched Russell Wilson for Jarrett Stidham, but I have a feeling you don't mind watching the Denver Broncos struggle at quarterback.
Not at all. Not at all.
Um,
Nope.
neither do
I'm
I.
with.
So I have them going with Leatu, the edge rusher from UCLA. 6'5", 259 pounds. Um, he had 12 and a half tackles for loss, 10 and a half sacks, forced 3 fumbles in 2022. This past year, he had 49 tackles, 21 and a half TFLs, 13 sacks, forced 2 fumbles, was an All-American, won the Lombardi Award. This is a big guy that can get after the quarterback. I think that's the kind of guy that you could add to Denver, who did not nail the uniform reduce, unlike Houston. But somebody's got to try and look good in those uniforms, and I think adding Latu from UCLA would be a good move for their defense.
Well, I'm disappointed yet humbled. You picked the same guy that I was picking for Denver here at 12. I was hoping to be able to do some diving in a little bit myself with him, but you pretty much said everything there is to say about him. I guess the only thing worth noting is he did have to medically retire because he had a neck injury when he was actually on the University of Washington and had to medically retire, had numbness, and then had to do neck strengthening exercises before he joined UCLA. Completely flipped him around, um, which is kind of wild. Jalen Phillips, Miami Dolphins defensive end, had to medically retire when he was on UCLA and then went to go to Miami. So kind of funny how things kind of flip flop like that. But nonetheless, I'm with you here. I think with them trading for Zach Wilson, I don't know that I'm sold. I don't know that I'm sold that they're done getting quarterback, but I think you have to ask yourself, and you said it, the quarterbacks that you would potentially want to trade up for and get are already gone. So then you're really asking yourself, how much do you love Bo Nix and how much do you love Michael Penix Jr.? If you are absolutely in love with them and you think there's no way either one of those two guys are going to be there by the time your pick comes in the second round, then maybe you trade down with someone. Maybe you try and do something to get them. I don't know. I don't think I could take them this early at 12. But if Sean Payton wants his next guy that he can mold, he can build, maybe. But at this point, like I said, the quarterbacks that we're going to be seeing taken in the first round are assume would at this point be taken. So I had them going Latu as well to help on the defensive side of things. But nonetheless, we'll see what happens here with that. Um, yeah, should be interesting. Should be interesting. What happens here with Denver? Moving on now to another AL. Think of baseball here. Another AFC West team here, and that is the Las Vegas Raiders. Um, I could see them maybe going receiver. I don't, however. I think they need to do whatever they can um, to keep the quarterback up and steady there. So I have them going offensive line, and I have them going with Olu Fashanu, tackle from Penn State, 6'6", 312 monster. Again, very pro ready with his frame. Um, is ready to roll. And anytime you hear offensive linemen out of Penn State, a lot of the times they're going to be balling out and they're going to do well in the NFL. So, like we've said 1,000 times, games are won and lost in the trenches, and I think that's what one of the things that they're going to have to do to um, to be elite. So I have them going with Olu from Penn State here at 13. What do you have?
I also have them going offensive tackle, but I have them going sticking on the West Coast, taking Talise Fuaga, the offensive tackle from Oregon State, also 6'6", 324 pounds. Did well in games for the Bears. 2022, he only allowed a hurry on 365 pass blocking snaps. That's 2.1% of pass blocking snaps. 2023, similar story, 10 hurries on 351 pass blocking snaps, so a little bit up at 2.8%, but that's still not bad. He had an 88.2 PFF grade for last year. I think, like you said, you got to protect whoever's going to be your quarterback. You got to give them time so that you can throw the ball. I think adding a guy like Talise or even Olu, either one of those, great pick for the Raiders.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with that. I think that's definitely the no doubt route you have to go with that. Um, And again, new head coach. I mean, he was interim, Coach Pierce for the last however many games of the season last year. But we saw what these guys did for him. Made them fun to watch for the few games that he coached. So we'll see what happens there on the O line for the new Las Vegas Raiders. Next pick, number 14, the New Orleans Saints. Who do you have the Saints going with here at 14?
So I've got them taking a guy you had going a little earlier in the draft. I think address the defensive line with Byron Murphy the second.
Okay.
6 foot tall, 297, like you said. He was the number one defensive tackle at the combine per next gen stats. Um, 2023 Big 12 defensive lineman of the year, first team all Big 12, 91.1 PFF grade, 8.5 tackles for loss, 5 sacks. He also had a rushing touchdown against Washington in that CFP loss and a receiving touchdown against Wyoming earlier in the year. So a little bit of William Perry action going on there between him and Tavondre Sweat, who blew his shot at being a first round pick if he had one. But I think adding Byron Murphy, you can't go wrong there. Add a big guy, shore up the line. And why not go with arguably the top defensive lineman in this draft?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I have them going offensive line, and I actually have Talise Fuaga going here to the New Orleans Saints. Um, the first year tenure for Derek Carr and the Saints wasn't. I think there was more to be desired there for sure. But one of the reasons why that's the case is because offensive line play was horrible, was not good last year, and Derek Carr got the piss beat out of him almost every single game. Um, so I think if you give him a guy like Fuaga help in front of him here, I mean you just sung his praise as a pick before, so I don't need it to sound like a broken record here by any means, but very good footwork, short area quickness is also very solid for him too. So I think Saints should go O line, but regardless, if they went the other side of the trenches and D line, um, couldn't be mad at that either. Couldn't be mad at that. Next, pick 15 is the Indianapolis Colts. Now, again, I mentioned watch, Chris Ballard, Jim Irsay do something crazy and trade up into the top 5 and snag Marvin Harrison Jr. Um, I I I think they could. I don't know if they would trade up that far, but I think it could be traded up. We'll have to see what happens here. But I think with how solid the AFC South on the offensive side of things, with all the young talent that's going on there, I think it could very much benefit them to go D back, and I have them going with Terrion Arnold um, on the cornerback side of things there too. Mentioned him a little bit earlier too. But in 2023, 63 tackles, 5 picks. Um, he's a good technique, 6 foot, 189. Um, has a ball hawking corner who positions himself well as kind of the words that have been used to describe him. Maybe shades of like a Darius Slay potentially. Also had similar traits, I think, when he was coming out too, and what he's made for himself in the NFL. But like you mentioned before, we're not gonna say he is the next Darius Slay because Darius Slay is very good at what he does. But similar traits for sure. Um, yeah, I think they have an offense that's pretty solid. I could maybe see them getting another offensive weapon, maybe O line, maybe another receiver to throw up there, pair with Pittman potentially. But and Downs, but I do think that defense might be the play here. So I have them going Arnold at Alabama.
We agree on positioning.
Okay.
Them going with a little bit different player, a little bit different than we've seen since Jason Sehorn.
Hmm.
That would
Hmm.
be a starting white corner in the NFL.
Okay.
I have them picking Cooper DeJean here for a handful of reasons. One of them being the Indiana Fever already selected Caitlin Clark, so you got that Iowa connection there. Plus, they host the Big Ten tournament every year, almost every year. Um, so you got that connection there, and I believe the last Iowa defensive back I can remember doing well at like a corner slot safety, like a versatile player, was Bob Sanders, who was pretty good for the Colts in the mid to late 2000s. Um, Not that Cooper DeJean is anything like Bob Sanders, but just a interesting connection there. Cooper DeJean, I also like his upside as a returner, and I'm very curious to see how the new return rules will
Hmm.
affect the draft,
True.
if at all. We did see that one rugby player being signed. I believe it was the 49ers that
Mhm.
was signed like within hours of those rule changes being made. So I think there will be an increased value seen on players who have returning ability. And as long as he can learn what a valid fair catch signal is, Cooper DeJean is one of the best returners there is.
Definitely no
Um,
shade thrown there.
all jokes aside, he averaged 13 yards per punt return in college, which is pretty solid.
Yeah.
Um, and then he also huge difference maker on the defensive side too. 2022, he had 72 targets, only allowed 37 catches, 422 yards allowed, had five picks. Three of those were pick sixes.
Mm.
This guy gets the ball in his hands and he's a playmaker. That's where I think he could find some usage early on as both a corner and a returner. And he also, this past year, he only allowed 20 catches on 46 targets for 194 yards, no touchdowns allowed. He had two picks and only allowed a 37.8 passer rating.
Mm.
We're talking about a dynamic playmaker who is also a shutdown corner.
Mm.
And I think that would be a great fit for the Colts defense and for their special teams.
What a breakdown. What a breakdown. That was good. That was good. No, I like that. I think yeah, another potential explosive play there. And yeah, Indiana side of things, there we go. There we go. So next pick, Seattle Seahawks have the 16th overall pick. Who do you have Seattle going with here at 16?
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, they selected a guy I was really high on, Boye Mafe from the University of
Yes.
Minnesota, to be their edge rusher. I have them going with another edge rusher because there are two edges of the offensive line that you have to apply pressure from. And I think Jared Verse, the 6'4", 254-pounder from Florida State, put up 31 bench press reps and ran a 4.58 40 at the combine. This is a guy who's a two-time first-team All-American. Many people thought he was going to enter the draft last year. He decided to come back to Florida State. And if it weren't for that injury to Jordan Travis, probably is not probably, for sure, is playing in the college football playoff.
Yeah.
Very unfortunate end of their season. Started his career at Albany, where he had 9.5 sacks as a redshirt sophomore. 2022, he had 17 TFLs, 9 sacks at Florida State. And then again, this past year, he had 12.5 TFLs and another 9 sacks. So this is a guy who knows how to get to the quarterback, has had 27 sacks in the past 3 years. I think that's somebody that you could pair with Boye Mafe and get some pressure going there in Seattle.
Okay. I have Seattle going with a guy who is already in the state, and that is offensive tackle Troy Fatanu. Um,
Yes.
I think this could be great. Fun little fact for you folks. His college offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb, is now the offensive coordinator of the Seattle Seahawks. So you talk about being in a system where you're likely going to already know the verbiage, you're already going to know the checks, the plays, everything. I think this could make a lot of sense if Troy is available at that point for Seattle here. Um, I would love to see that happen. I think, again, offensive line is a position group that you can never go wrong in if you need it, especially depth. But if that guy's available already understanding the offense that he's going to be in, that could be huge. That could be huge, big time for Seattle. So, yeah, I have them going with Troy Furtanu out of Washington. So you're staying in the state. Sorry if you wanted to get out. Um, at 17, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars. This is a position where I could go offense. Could go offense. I don't think they have a dire need for offensive help. But um I have them going defense kind of for the same reason as I was mentioning the Colts earlier with a very solid AFC South division on the offensive talent. I think if you put in a defensive back and the guy you talked about a little bit earlier, Quinion Mitchell, I think would be huge for them. The defensive back from Toledo. I think you touched on a potential area of concern is that the talent, but nonetheless, still playing at a Division I school. There were games where he went up against higher Division I talent and held his own. He could show he belonged. He could show he belonged for sure. So we'll see what happens there. But I have Jacksonville going with Mitchell from Toledo. Who do you have here?
I also have them going cornerback, but I have them going with Terrion Arnold from
Okay.
Alabama, who you talked about a little earlier.
Mhm.
Um, he took a big step forward this past year, and that's taking a big step forward after being a freshman All American in 2022, where he only allowed 28 catches on 52 targets, 383 yards, 2 touchdowns, had a pick, but had an 82.5% or an 82.5 passer rating allowed in 2022. Well, he took that personally. 2023 on 79 targets, he only allowed 41 catches, 441 yards, 2 TDs, but then picked the ball off 5 times, dropping that passer rating from an 82.5 all the way to a 50.7,
Mm,
and was named first team All American. I
mm.
think a guy that can take a step like that in 1 year is the guy who can take that next step once he comes to the league. And I think Jacksonville needs another shutdown corner. I haven't been thoroughly impressed with their secondary ever since Jalen Ramsey left. Why not add Terrion Arnold?
Yep. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, they're a couple defensive players away, I think, in the secondary from
Oh,
not choking at the end of the year. So we'll see what happens there for sure. Pick number 18, we have the Cincinnati Bengals. Um, there's a couple ways you could go. Personally, I have them going offensive line. I think that has been it's been better these last couple years as far as offensive line play, but still not outstanding. So I have them going offensive tackle here, J.C. Latham, out of Alabama.
mhm.
Um, this is a guy who started all 13 games on the 2022 season at right tackle his sophomore year, allowed 0 sacks, 12 pressures, and 1 quarterback hit across 517 pass block attempts. And then in 2023, named a second team All American, started all 14 games, only allowed 2 sacks, 3 quarterback hits, and 14 pressures amongst 443 pass block snaps. Um, he also, just a fun fact, nicknamed himself the Trench King, and has a corresponding TK chain as well with that too. So, nicknaming yourself the Trench King, you're certainly gonna put the spotlight on you a little bit for that. So you got to perform, and he has. So what do you have the Bengals doing here at 18?
18. I also have them going offensive line. Guy you mentioned earlier, Troy Fatanu, the offensive tackle from Washington. He was part of Washington's Joe Moore Award for Outstanding Offensive Line Unit this past year. Um, and he gets a lot of pass pro snaps there at Washington with Kalen DeBoer. He had, like you just mentioned, the pass blocking snaps for JC Latham. It was like 443 in 2023,
Mhm.
517 in 2022. 2022, Troy Fatanu had 608 pass blocking snaps, allowed 0 sacks and only 13 hurries. And then in 2023, he did allow 2 sacks and 18 hurries, but that was on 623 pass blocking snaps.
Mm.
It's just unbelievable the amount of snaps that these offensive linemen were like asked to take because that's what Washington did. That's what happens when you have three wide receivers who are probably day one, day two talent there. Maybe four with Giles Jackson too. Like that is just a stupid good passing offense. And for him to be kind of the anchor of that up front, I think that is a great pick for Cincinnati. Got to protect Burrow. Just
Yep.
you got to protect him. You have the receivers, you have everything you need. Just protect Burrow.
Yep. Yep. I think it's pretty simple with that too. I think at that point it's just going to be best O lineman available. Who's the best O lineman at that time? Who are they going to go with? So,
Got it in all caps there. Oh,
okay.
protect Burrow.
Yep. I'll take your word for it. I'll take your word for it. Um,
The screen doesn't like putting it up that close with this virtual background.
what are you talking? You're not actually there.
No.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I wish we could get MSP Athletics across the top at the draft.
That's fair. That's fair. Pick number 19 here is going to be the LA Rams. So talk to me about the Rams. What position do they go with here?
They have some needs.
Mhm.
I think the biggest one that stands out to me is the most recent hole that was created. And that's when Aaron Donald retired. You now lost a guy who has been dominating on your defensive line, has been the anchor of your defense for, I want to say, a decade.
Mhm.
Why not go out, draft another defensive lineman? I have them taking Jerzon Newton, defensive lineman from Illinois, 6'2", 304 pounds. He's not going to replace Aaron Donald. Like, I mean, that's the goal is to replace Aaron Donald. You're not going to replace Aaron Donald, but adding a guy who was a consensus All-American, Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, Big Ten Defensive Lineman of the Year, two-time first team All Big Ten. This is a guy who at defensive tackle in this past year, he had 8.5 TFLs, 7.5 sacks. Previous year, 14 TFLs, 5.5 sacks. You have a defensive tackle that's getting after the passer like that. That's the kind of thing that the Rams need on their defense. And I would love to have Jerzon Newton in Minnesota. I just don't know if we'll be able to pull the trigger on him at number 11, and I doubt he's going to be there at 23.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. We're both in agreement with position group here for the exact same reason that you said. You have arguably, if not arguably, the greatest defensive tackle to ever play the game, and Aaron Donald out here just retire. So that is a glaring hole that you now have to try and fill. Nobody's going to get drafted here expecting to be the next Aaron Donald by any means. Those are large shoes to fill in, and I hope nobody gives anyone those expectations. But I think you can try a little bit here, and I think you go edge. I have them going with Dallas Turner, guy you kind of talked about a little bit earlier. Very athletic, was invited to also, fun fact, Team USA basketball camp in high school before moving to football full time here with that. So again, a guy that very intellectually solid too, knows the game well. Any player that is going to come from a Nick Saban Alabama team, is going to understand the game and know how to play it. So, yeah, I have them going Dallas Turner here at 19. And like you mentioned, there's a couple ways they could go with it, but I think D line is definitely a hole that you have to attempt to try and fill here if you're the Rams.
Could go
Uh,
Bo Nix.
I, I mean, conversation could be had for sure.
I think they
Stafford has
can
been
sit put
younger.
and hope he falls.
What's that?
I think they can just sit there and hope he falls into the second round, maybe trade back up into the later parts of the first.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense. Anywho, so moving on, pick number 20 here is the Pittsburgh Steelers. Um, they made a couple of moves at the quarterback, bringing in Russell Wilson, bringing in Justin Fields. Um, so we'll see who wins that. I think either will be an upgrade over what they had with Kenny Pickett for sure. Um, so I'm not as worried about the offensive weapons that are around them as Pickett was going to need a lot of help, and it was a younger offense for the most part. Just bringing a veteran guy like Wilson, potentially athletic monster like Justin Fields. You don't need a whole lot of help in that realm anymore, but I do think you do need help on the offensive line. I have them going with Georgia offensive tackle Amarius Mims, 6'8", 340 monster, very high upside. He in 2022 saw a lot of time as a reserve offensive tackle in 14 of 15 games and got starts in the Peach Bowl and the national championship against TCU. And then also played right tackle in 7 games of 2023, starting in six. Had an ankle injury against the conference opener season against South Carolina that kind of kept him out for most of the rest of the year. But in his 3-year college career, he did not allow a quarterback sack or a hit across 402 pass block snaps and only allowed 6 pressures. So obviously got got kind of screwed with an injury last year that maybe if doesn't happen, we're talking about he's going a lot higher and maybe the Olu or the Joe Alt range, but didn't happen. Nonetheless, I think this would be a great pick for Pittsburgh here at 20. What do you have?
Yeah, Pittsburgh at 20. I also have them going offensive tackle. I have them going in state with Olu Fashanu. Prior to this past year, he was pretty much considered a top five pick. Uh, but just with other guys also breaking out, uh, he just kind of slipped down draft boards from what I've seen. And we don't know what teams' draft boards look like. We might be looking at Olu Fashanu going there to Arizona at number 4. Who knows? But all of the mocks I've seen and the mock draft simulators I've used have him falling down a little more. I think Olu Fashanu staying in state with the Pittsburgh Steelers. You talked about him earlier. 0 sacks allowed in college and only allowed 1 hit his whole college career. Um, he was consensus All-American, Big Ten Offensive Lineman of the Year. Big guy, can kind of help protect either Fields or Wilson, whoever they go with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that's the crew that they got to go with that. Protect the QB, protect the QB,
Mm-hmm.
and your world's going to be a lot better. Your world's going to be in a lot better position for sure. Now next pick. This is my first pick since the 2022 NFL draft. As I mentioned before, we did not have one last year. So Caleb, but I'll have you start with this one. Miami Dolphins at 21. Um, what do you have us going? Who are we getting? Who are we picking in a couple days?
I have a feeling you might like this pick because you had him going slightly earlier. I have them going with J.C. Latham, the versatile offensive lineman from Alabama. He
Okay,
has some experience, yeah, experience as a guard and as an offensive tackle. Um, I mean, like you mentioned, I don't. You already went over these stats. Pretty good offensive lineman and that versatility there. I think that's what you need is to protect Tua, give him time. You already got all the talent on offense. Just got to shore up that offensive line just a little bit, I think.
Mhm.
And JC Latham would go a long ways to helping shore that lineup.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you on that one. I think we did lose a lot this offseason. Lost Christian Wilkins, lost Andrew Van Ginkel, lost Robert Hunt, um, lost a lot of dudes, lost Xavier Howard. Um, so there are many position groups I think you could entertain. At the end of the day, though, you got to give your quarterback time to throw the football. And Austin Jackson played fantastic this year. We finally see him hit, I think, his peak. I think he's at his peak, and I'm hoping he stays there because he played very well last year. And Teron Armstead, great guy. Injuries have been a concern. And he's not getting any younger. He thought about retiring this current offseason that we're in now. So I can't imagine we have him for too much longer, too, which means you got to try and get some offensive line play now to win now. Um, I have them going with offensive lineman Graham Barton out of Duke. Um, a tackle. He is a tackle, but they've kind of mentioned that size wise, they don't know length wise, I should say, to have him play tackle. So they think a move to guard might make more sense, which is fine with me. We have Austin Jackson on one side and Tron Armstead on the other. Move him inside closer to Tua, maybe opposite side of Isaiah Wynn, who will likely be our left guard, I would assume. Put him in right guard, see what he can do there. But um, I think 100% offensive line is the way you have to go here. I've seen potential other wide receiver threats. We do not need wide receiver threats. We don't need more. We don't need more. Um, now and again, I'm saying this is an absolute pipe dream, and I do not think this is going to happen. But if for whatever reason that tight end from Georgia, Brock Bowers, is sitting there at 21, I would not be mad at all in the slightest if we went with Brock Bowers. We did not have a tight end from a touchdown last year. As much as I love Durham Smythe, if Durham Smythe is your number one tight end, you're probably not having a whole lot of success on that front.
No.
Um, so, like I said, Bowers, if he is there at 21, let's take him. I would be thoroughly shocked. We're going to need a Laramie Tunsil situation for him to drop that low again in the draft. So, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Um, but anywho, O-line, what we got to do. Pick number 22 here, Philadelphia Eagles. This is a team that is pretty solid all around. Um, they've had a couple retirements, obviously, but I think the position group that they 100% absolutely undoubtedly need to get better in is defensive back play. They got absolutely torched when it meant the most last year at the end of the season and in the playoffs. So Cooper DeJean, you are a Philadelphia Eagle. Welcome to it. That would be an unbelievable upgrade to them on helping them on the defensive side of teams. And again, a team that doesn't have a lot of holes right now, a couple retirements, but they've filled them obviously big shoes to fill into for sure. But um and you obviously sung his praises earlier and mentioned all that he's going to be able to do on the special team side of things. But I had DeJean going to the Philadelphia Eagles at 22. Who do you have them going with?
The Eagles have the potential to do something absolutely hilarious, and that would be taking somebody right before the Vikings who ends up being a bust and letting the Vikings take the better player at that position if the Vikings were in the market for a DB.
Mm-hmm.
We are, but there's other needs that need to be addressed. I just remembered that glorious year when they took Jalen Rager, who is now, I believe, with the Patriots. Um, we're not going to see a repeat of that, I don't think. I think Philadelphia here, like you said, they need a defensive back. I have them taking Nate Wiggins, the corner from Clemson, 6'1", 173 pounds, ran a 4.28 40.
Yeah.
His first team All ACC this past year. He only allowed a 44.4 passer rating this past year on 41 targets. He had a pick six, two interceptions. He also had a pick six the previous year. but allowed a 74.8 passer rating the previous year. So another guy who took a big step forward, dropping his passer rating allowed by a whole 30 points. A guy like that, if you're able to take that step from one year to the next at the college level, and at Clemson nonetheless, that tells me you're probably ready to go ahead and take that next step when it comes to the pro level, which is what the Eagles would be asking of him, is to step right in, be a
Yep.
day one starter at corner. And I think he has the ability to do that.
Mhm.
And I don't really want the Eagles to get any better, but he would be making the Eagles better.
Yep. Yep. I would agree. I would agree with that for sure. Eagles love to get the depth. They love to get the the splash picks that maybe other people pass an eye on that end up being really well. So we'll see what happens there for Philly. This is pick number 2 for the Minnesota Vikings at 23. Again, potential for this pick to get traded to move up into the top 3, potentially top 5 maybe. But nonetheless, assuming they stand pat here at 23, who do you have the Vikings going with?
Just gonna quote RG3 on this one.
Yeah.
Gonna bring that big Penix energy to Minnesota. Michael
Okay.
Penix Jr., you are a Minnesota Viking. I would not mind us taking him at number 11 either, but I think with the way that it should play out, there's probably a chance we can take him at 23. So why not take Dallas Turner at 11 and then scoop up Michael Penix Jr. here at number 23? The elephant in the room is his injury concerns.
Yep.
That is somewhat valid, but I believe it has been overhyped, and so does Michael Penix based on the statement he put out. I believe it was yesterday or earlier today. Um, he's had 1,759 career dropbacks and only been sacked 31 times. He
Mm.
also only ran the ball 134 times through 49 games. He's not using his legs to extend the plays. He doesn't throw the ball very well outside of the pocket. Although what he does really well is navigating the pocket and resetting his underneath him before he throws the ball so that he can deliver those laser throws that he throws all the time. He identifies the pre-snap pressure well and makes pass pro adjustments. These are the kind of smart decisions that you need a quarterback who does have an injury history to be able to make. And then there's also the fact that it's been 2,000 snaps since his last injury. At some point, we have to accept that injury history is at some point history. It may still bother you, but he's shown that it doesn't. Uh, in Penny's own words, he's glad that he's had to fight through injuries to learn how to bounce back. And my favorite part from that was his quote that you can run all the MRIs and X-rays you want, but an EKG, a heart test, will tell you everything you need to know about him. And
Yeah.
so, based on all of that, I'm not super concerned about the injury history. What stands out to me more is during 3 years at IU, which were riddled with injuries, or 4 years, his 4 years at IU, which were riddled with injuries, he still threw for 4 yards, 29 touchdowns, 15 picks. But then when he got to Washington in 2022, he threw for 4,600 passing yards, 31 touchdowns, 8 picks, won AP Comeback Player of the Year, and then followed that up with 4,900 passing yards, 36 touchdowns, 11 picks, which did all come in the back half of the season. So that is a little bit of a concern that all interceptions just started coming right in the home stretch when it mattered the most. But he still won the Maxwell Award, was first team All American, quarterbacked Washington to a national championship game. I don't know what else people see from him. His deep ball is beautiful, and you can say that it's because he had 3 or 4 NFL caliber wide receivers. Well, newsflash, he's going to have that in the NFL.
And
He's going to
you
have
still got
Justin
to throw the
Jefferson.
ball. Yep.
Yeah. Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson. This is probably one of the best situations of a QB needy team for a QB to land in because you already have the best wide receiver in the NFL. You have a rookie receiver who almost went for the pieces are there, and I think Michael Penix Jr. could absolutely thrive in this.
Looks like Caleb bounced off of here. Oh, there we go. Caleb, welcome back. Welcome back. That you were just spitting too much fire with Michael Penix. They're like, we can't have this guy talking anymore. He's got to go later. He's got to go later.
I just want Michael Penix in Minnesota. I think he can succeed in Minnesota, and I'm ready to buy that jersey, ready to buy that big Penix Energy T-shirt. Sign me up for Michael Penix in Minnesota.
So let's say this. And well, I'll talk about my pick and then I'll ask you. So I actually have Vikings going a position group that I had mentioned earlier. I have them going edge. I have them going with Jared Verse. So a guy that you talked about earlier. I don't know that he'll be around at this point. That was just more of a, oh man, I picked all these guys and he's still available. Vikings need defensive, rush help with the Neil Hunter being gone. So bringing Jared Verse, I think that'd be great for him. Anyways, though, but the question I was going to ask you is, let's say the Vikings do pair these picks up, like you mentioned about 100 times, move up into the top five. If assuming that is the case, I'm assuming we're probably not seeing a Penix or Bo Nix go in the first round. They're probably an early second round day. Or do you think a team like a Denver Broncos or maybe a Raiders try and pair up some picks, future picks, to move back into the first round and try and get the maybe end of the first? What do you think happens there? Assuming because I'm just gonna say this. I think if the Vikings don't trade the picks, they stand pat, are there at 23. I think that would be probably the absolute last spot that we're going to see a quarterback being taken at the absolute very least would be Vikings at
Barring,
23,
yeah.
assuming they don't go quarterback at 11. They go quarterback 11, you know, then who knows. But anyways, that was a lot. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the teams that are picking from here on out, that being Dallas, Green Bay, Tampa, Arizona, Buffalo. I mean, you know the rest. The teams that went on runs in the playoffs, none of them need a quarterback.
Mhm.
That's why they're picking this late. They don't need a quarterback. So unless somebody trades back up into the first round, the Minnesota Vikings at number 23 is the last spot as the draft stands right now that I could see someone taking a quarterback.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree with you on that. We'll have to see. I would love to see Penix go in the first round. Like I'm a big Penix guy as well with you too. So I would love to see that man go in the first round. Um, I just I think it will be tough. I think it'll be tough. But who knows? Again, we have been shocked before on draft night, so maybe he'll sneak his way in there. And I'd be fine with that. Pick number 24, we have the Dallas Cowboys. Um, could go a couple different ways. I think could go defensive line, could go offensive line a little bit with that too. Um, but as we all know, does Jerry Jones love to make a splash? I have him going with wide receiver out of Texas, Xavier
Mhm.
Worthy, 5'11", 165 pounds, absolute speed demon. I mean, an absolute field tilting speed for sure. This man is unbelievable. Thoughts behind that was more so, and I have in my notes as I quote, and I quote, Jerry, you never know. And so I think with potential contract, interesting situations going on with Dak Prescott, potentially
Mhm.
with CeeDee Lamb, I think if you can get a guy in there to put opposite, maybe toss in the slot who is just has blazing speed, um, that could help out a lot. And I think that could be great for Dallas to do and to really just bolster that offense even more. So I have to going Xavier Worthy here at 24, staying in the Lone Star State. Who do you have Dallas going with?
I don't hate that pick. I have them going with Amarius Mims, the offensive tackle out of Georgia that you mentioned earlier.
Okay.
All the potential in the world, elite size, standing at 6'8", 340 pounds, didn't allow a sack in college. although the limited starting experience is why we're not talking about him going earlier, as you mentioned. Didn't allow many hurries, but also if you take his past 2 years, combine them, he still has fewer pass blocking snaps than pretty much any of the other guys did just this past year. So there is concern there, but I think if you're sitting there at number 24, you might as well take a swing on a very high end prospect on the offensive line. And that's something that Dallas has historically had is a good offensive line.
Yeah.
It hasn't been as great lately, so why not take a flyer on Amarius Mims at 24?
And I think logically that would make the most sense, but for them to be an offensive line for sure. Um, that doesn't necessarily always mean that's what Jerry's going to end up doing. We've seen that in the past for sure. But nonetheless, Dallas is always a wild card to what they're going to do there. So we'll see what happens. Green Bay Packers here at pick number 25. Great year last year. Did much better than a lot of people thought, and including you and I both on this podcast, that's for sure. But being in your division, Green Bay Packers at 25, you see them a lot more than I do. What do you have them going with here?
Who is the starting quarterback for Fresno State or something like that? They should just take another Mountain West quarterback first round. No, as this one pains me even more as both a Vikings and a Gophers fan. I have them going safety because that was really they could go offensive line too, but one of the biggest holes I saw, which is like their roster is solid. I have them going with safety Tyler Newman from Minnesota, 6'1", 199 pounds. He has Minnesota's career record with 13 interceptions. He also had 207 career tackles and 3 forced fumbles. He was a first team All American and All Big Ten safety this past year. Had an 89.2 PFF grade, is arguably the top. I think lowest I've seen him is the third best safety in this draft, and those are the experts where you look at some of their other picks and it tells you I'm not going to believe everything you have to say. But he's not the unanimous number one safety, but he's definitely in the mix for the top safety. And it would just be so fitting for him to go over to Green Bay, just like a handful of other Gopher legends that we've seen,
Yeah.
such as Kamal Martin and Daryl Thompson. It would suck, but it would be a good fit for him and would wish him the best and a quick entry into free agency.
That's right. Sucks I have to boo against you for a few years, but we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. I have Packers also going with secondary help here. I have them going at corner, and that is arguably the best name in the draft, cornerback Kool-Aid McKinstry. Now, I do believe that that is not his actual name, but that is the name that he goes by, and so that's the name that I'm calling him. It's Kool-Aid McKinstry. Very, very physical, is not afraid to use his hands, is not afraid to tackle. And with that, he does a pretty good job at not getting penalties. So he's smart with when using his hands and not doing it too much. Um, he just gave up 1 touchdown on 482 coverage snaps in 2023 per Pro Football Focus. What's that? Um, he Yeah, we'll see what happens again. Another secondary player out of Alabama, I think could be a potential Swiss Army knife for him out there,
Mhm.
for the Green Bay Packers. I've seen another player that came out of Alabama in the secondary who was picked by Miami Dolphins, Minka Fitzpatrick, have gotten a little bit of comps to him too. Similar type Swiss Army knife guy, isn't afraid of contact, very high IQ. Fitzpatrick, better of a ball hawk, much better of a ball hawk for sure. But nonetheless, I think that's a position that the Packers need help in. Um, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, I have Kool-Aid McKinstry. You are a Green Bay Packer. So let's see what happens there on that one for sure. Pick number 26 is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Um, surprised a lot of folks with how they played last year. Baker Mayfield did outstanding. Keeping Mike Evans around a little bit too, Chris Godwin. I think offensive side of the ball, they're very set. I don't think they need a lot of help. But they did lose Shaq Barrett to my Miami Dolphins. Now, he's on the wrong side of 30, so, you know, say what you will about that. Is that big of a loss? I don't know. Nonetheless, I have them going with Edge, and I have them going with Chop Robinson from Penn State. Um, he didn't play in many games, only played in 10 games, but 15 tackles, um, 7.5 tackles for loss, and 4 sacks. So numbers that aren't going to jump out of a huge book for you by any means at all. But um, he's an active guy, very good off the edge, solid motor, very relentless out there in his pursuit. So that could be a good, just kind of good piece there. That's kind of the luxury of these teams that are picking where they are now, is that they don't have a ton of holes typically, and so a lot of times they can probably just go with best available. So I have Tampa going with Chop Robinson here at pick number 23. But um, yeah, who do you have Tampa rolling with here for 23?
Yeah, number 23, I have Tampa rolling with the guy that you just took off your board, that being Kool-Aid McKinstry. Only thing I'll add to that is two-time first-team All-SEC 2023, first-team All-American. And like I mentioned with Cooper DeJean, a little bit of a knack as a returner. He had 35 career punt returns, averaging just under 12 yards per return. We'll see. It's yet to be seen how much the new return rules are going to be affecting the game and how willing teams are to put their starting corners out there as return men. We'll see, but I think Kool-Aid McKinstry would be a great fit for Tampa.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, that'd be great. Again, a team that probably the help that they do need is on the defensive side of things. Not even that a ton. I mean, Todd Bowles is a fantastic head coach, and defense is his thing for sure. So we'll see what happens with that. Uh, Arizona Cardinals, they have their second first round pick. A lot of times when you see teams that have two first round picks, a lot of time that second one, oftentimes is the one that gets shopped or talks about getting shopped. So maybe this is a position where something gets traded here, but nonetheless, Cardinals at 27. Who do you have them going with here?
I have them going with a versatile offensive lineman that I thought about maybe sending to Miami earlier. And that's Oregon center slash guard Jackson Powers Johnson, 6'3", 328 pounds, 0 sacks allowed in his college career. Won the Remington Award as the best center, was a unanimous All American. And over his career, he's got snaps at 4 of the 5 offensive line positions. He's got snaps at both guard spots and at center, and even got 5 snaps in at right tackle. Um, like I said, 0 sacks, but he's also only allowed 1 hurry in each of the past 2 seasons, uh, including 497 pass blocking snaps this past year, which comes to 1 hurry on, so let's see, hurries on 0.2% of pass blocking snaps,
Yeah,
which you got to protect Kyler Murray. If
have
you've
to.
already got Kyler, his next receiver in Marvin Harrison Jr., you could go defense here, but I think adding someone as an anchor in the middle of that offensive line, like a Jackson Powers Johnson, would be a power move.
I think offensive line, nice, nice. I think offensive line certainly makes sense there for sure. And actually, that name was a name that I also considered Miami taking at 21, um, Jackson Powers Johnson. But I have Cardinals actually going on the other side of the ball. I have them going defensive line, and I have them going
Mm.
with Darius Robinson, edge rusher out of Missouri. I think that's a defense that has had some injuries, have had some players not live up to expectations and not play as well. So I think let's throw this guy again. Very, very solid pass rushing talent, very solid motor, very strong guy too. So That could be solid. One of the things they did mention is he can play a little out of control sometimes. So while it's good to have a big motor like that, you got to know how to use that motor correctly in the right way.
Mhm.
So let's see if they go defense. But again, offensive line would certainly make sense for him at 27 there um, for Arizona. Now, pick number 28 is the Buffalo Bills. And a few weeks ago, I think you had an argument. They have a luxury to kind of do whatever position group is best available at that time. And then
Mhm.
Gabe Davis left, and then Stephon Diggs got traded. And that left fast. That left very fast. And so I think it has a pretty glaring hole at wide receiver that they need there. Um, I could potentially see Buffalo trying to trade up. Maybe it's hard to say top 10 where likely the elite receivers are going to go, but maybe, middle of the first round a little bit can snag someone else that might be available. But nonetheless, at pick number 28, I have them going with Adonai Mitchell, another wide receiver out of Texas here, 6'2", 205, 14 games last year, had 845 yards and 11 touchdowns. Tall, smooth athlete, really good body control, sure hands out there as well too. Um, he was named the Big 12 Newcomer of the Year after getting 55 catches and 845 yards in 2023, like I mentioned, and all Big 12 second team as well too. So we'll see what happens there, but I think Buffalo 100%. Lost a couple guys in the secondary, but glaring hole at wide receiver that they need help with. So who do you have Buffalo going with at 28?
And I agree with you there. Big hole with Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs leaving. So I have them going with Brian Thomas Jr., the 6'3", 209 wide receiver out of LSU, ran a 4.33 40. Um, just under 1,200 yards this past year with 17 touchdowns. That's the kind of guy that you need to go after if you want to replace. I mean, you're not going to replace both of them with one pick. You're not even going to replace Stephon Diggs with one pick right away,
Mhm.
unless you're the Vikings taking Justin Jefferson. Then you can. Um, I don't think Brian Thomas is the next Justin Jefferson, but I think, like you said, you have to go after wide receiver, and at that point, you go after whoever you think is the best receiver. And I think with him being 6'3", you kind of have to go after a bigger target because that's what Gabe Davis was. Um, I think, yeah, any receiver would be a good fit there. But Brian Thomas Jr., I really like that fit there.
Moving on, Detroit Lions at 29 here. One thing that we've known from Motor City Dan Campbell, MCDC here, as they talk about on the Pat McAfee show all the time, um, is he will get a player that he likes, not necessarily a position of need. If they have a guy that fits that kind of dog culture mentality, uh, that's that's typically the way that they've gone. Now, not to say that those positions didn't make sense at the time when they got them, like Penny Sewell, 100% needed offensive line help. I have them going with another offensive lineman. I have them going with West Virginia lineman Zach Frazier. Some people think that he might not be big enough to play center where he was playing at West Virginia. But obviously, I'm not making comparison, but we heard the same thing with Jason Kelsey too, right? Not big enough, small center, put together Hall of Fame career. Now, again, I'm not suggesting that he is Jason Kelsey, nor will he be a first ballot Hall of Famer when his career is all over. I hope so. I hope so. I don't know if
You
that's
heard
good.
it here first. Zach Frazier is the next Jason Kelsey.
No, no, no. See, that's how.
Credit Lucas Dorton.
No, 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 no. But yeah, we'll see what happens there at that pick. But I have them going offensive line. I could see them going a couple different ways, though. Who do you have the Lions taking at 29?
I have the Lions going with Chop Robinson, the edge rusher from Penn State. Pair another Big Ten pass rusher with Aiden Hutchinson. He needs somebody to rush the passer with. Chop Robinson, 6'3", 254, ran a 4.48 40. Had the fourth best next gen score for any edge rusher at the combine this year. Um, yeah, you already kind of went into this. He can get to the passer. He was first team All Big Ten this past year. I think getting one more edge rusher to pair with Aiden Hutchinson, and plus a guy named Chop, that just seems to fit in with Dan Campbell.
True. Choppy
Uh,
down at the knees.
Yup. So that's what I got the Lions doing there.
Now we have the Baltimore Ravens at pick 30. Brought in Derrick Henry in the backfield there. Obviously, we know Lamar Jackson loves to run. See some more consistency throwing the ball too. But a big part of that is sometimes he doesn't have time. Moses was traded. There's been some Ronnie Stanley injury concerns the last couple of years too. So I think if you really want to become an elite passing offense, running offense, not to say they already aren't, but even more so, I think you add offensive line. I have them going with the 6'8" behemoth out of Oklahoma, tackle Tyler Guyton there. Um, I think that could be a great pick for them. Has a lot of upside. He in played 10 games at right tackle in 2023, missed one game with injury, finished the season having allowed 12 pressures, 0 sacks, and 3 quarterback hits amongst 355 pass blocking snaps. Um, so that I think that could be a good, interesting position. But again, Ravens not a team that have a ton of holes, but offensive line makes sense. What do you think?
I think sticking on the offensive side of the ball, I have them going with Adonai Mitchell, the wide receiver from Texas you mentioned earlier. Good frame, 6'2", 205, runs a 4.34 40. The only question with him is his work ethic at times. He's as athletically gifted as anybody. Um, the pro comps I saw still hate them, but this is the one where it makes a lot of sense. Is George Pickens, a guy who is very athletic, good size, but the work ethic. How bad does he actually want to be there? He had 48 catches for 560 yards and 7 touchdowns in 2 seasons with Georgia. Then this past year with Texas, he had 55 catches for 845 yards and 11 touchdowns. I think if you can get the most out of Adonai Mitchell, he's not going to be in the Marvin Harrison Jr., Romo Dunze tier, but he could make his way into that second tier of receivers from this draft if he can be motivated. And I think Baltimore would be a good fit there.
Yeah, good head coach with Harbaugh. Get him motivated, get him ready to
Mm.
roll. I think that can make a lot of sense. It can make a lot of sense. Pick number 31 is the runner-ups in the Super Bowl, San Francisco 49ers. Who do you have the Niners going with at 31?
I mean, what do you get a team that pretty much has everything already?
Right.
Just keep building the trenches. I have them taking Graham Barton, the versatile offensive lineman from Duke,
Yeah.
6'5", 313 pounds, primarily a left tackle at Duke, but has the versatility to play all the positions on the line. He's allowed 2 sacks apiece in each of the past 2 years, and they didn't pass as much this past year, but the previous year they had 487 pass blocking snaps, in which he only allowed 8 hurries. But this past year with Riley Leonard at quarterback, tried to run the ball more. He only had 258 pass blocking snaps and still allowed 9 hurries. So his hurry percentage doubled. He only allowed a hurry on 1.6% of his snaps in 2022, which jumped up to 3.5% in 2023. Not super concerning when you take into consideration who his quarterback was and the kind of offense they tried to run. So I think versatile offensive lineman allows you to move him around, and he is talented. So I think that would be a good pick for the Chiefs there. Or not the Chiefs, the 49ers there.
Yeah,
Already turned the page to the Chiefs.
that's coming up. That's coming up here shortly, folks. Um, you bring up a good point. A team that has everything, what can you get them? Now, I had to think a little bit harder on this one. for that. Offensive line made sense. That definitely made a lot of sense. Trent Williams isn't getting any younger, still playing at a very elite level, but like I mentioned, not getting any younger. So my thought behind this was this. I know Debo Samuel has been a little. Does he love his contract situation? I know he's mentioned he does everything. He wants more. I can't imagine he leaves. But with the Brandon Ayuk situation going on now, with who knows if he's going to be in San Francisco next year, um, that's an interesting one to me, and that's something I'm keeping my eye on. So I'm operating as if one or both of those guys aren't there in the future. And if that's the case, give me another wide receiver talent. Give me Troy Franklin from Oregon, wide receiver, 6'2", 176, 1,300 receiving yards, 14 touchdowns, 81 catches last year. Um, Very good speed for being 6'2", very solid footwork as well too. Now, he is tall, but he's also lanky. He doesn't have a whole lot of build to him. So that could potentially be a reason as to why not. He did have some drops as well in there too. Um, but he was tied for third nationally in receiving touchdowns and sixth nationally in receiving yards. Um, and was named a second team All-American by the Associated Press as well too. So give him another wide receiver. Why not? Rich get richer. Rich get richer. Um, and then finally, the last pick here in the NFL draft going to the two-time defending champs, Kansas City Chiefs here. Um, again, you pick last, you have the luxury to do whatever you want. I do think there's a position that they, depending on legal situations go, are likely going to need with the whole Rashee Rice situation. So I still, regardless of that, even if he does come back, I still have them going wide receiver. I think at times you could tell that they needed a dude. They needed a dude out there to do something. Um, and I have them going wide receiver from University of Georgia, Lad McConkey, 6 foot, 186, was dinged up a little bit last year, had back and ankle injuries that kept him out for games of 2023. So we'll see what happens, but I have them going with McConkey. Um, Nonetheless, became a full-time starter in 2022, which is solid to base it off of 58 catches, 762 yards, and 7 touchdowns, and had 134 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns on 7 carries as well too, and was their primary punt returner. He had 11.3 yards a return. So can do it all when healthy. Put him on the Kansas City Chiefs. There's 3 straight Super Bowls for you, folks. So finish up, Caleb. Who do you have KC going with?
I mean, you said everything there was to say about Troy Franklin, and that's who I have them going with. You also had everything to say about their receiver situation, especially if Rashee Rice is not playing for them. You got to get another receiver. Is Marquez Valdes-Scantling still under contract? Who do they have? Kadarius Toney.
Right.
They need a guy like Troy Franklin to hopefully pair with Rashee Rice, and then let the pieces fall behind those two. But yeah, you already said everything there is to say. I don't have anything else to add. Troy Franklin, great fit for the Chiefs.
Love it. Love it. Well, there you have it, folks. One of us is going 100%. We're getting every pick right, especially with the trades that we mentioned too. So certainly do what you will with that information. But now's the fun part of the draft. Finish that up, Caleb. Give me some of your top, maybe diamond in the rough players that might not see day one, but day two, day three potentially that are worth talking about.
Yeah, I've got my favorite nose tackle in the whole draft. Um, Honestly, if we were to take a guy like Jerzon Newton in the first round, I would still want this guy in the mid rounds, and that's Christian Boyd, the nose tackle out of Northern Iowa, 6'4", 317-pound run stuffer. Um, he's seen as one of the best run stuffers in this class. which doesn't get you the same attention as the guys that are getting to the quarterback. He only had 3 sacks in 2023, which is still not bad for a run stuffer. He did have 28 hurries. Granted, that is playing against the Missouri Valley Conference, where he was first team All Missouri Valley. I think a guy like him in the right role, not expecting him to be your day one defensive tackle, expecting him to come in as a run stuffer. I think that's a great fit for him, and I would love to see him get a chance with the Vikings. Um, Sticking with the Minnesota theme, we got Brevin Spanford, the tight end from Minnesota, 6'7", 260 pounds. I've never seen someone that size hurdle people as easily as he does. Uh, and he's not even really seen as a receiving prospect. He's been an elite blocker. There were times where he had run blocking grades that were up there with the offensive line. You would see the 6 wide offensive line, and there were times you couldn't tell if he was a tackle or a tight end. He's a really good blocker. And just last year, the year before, we did see a tight end out of Minnesota get drafted a lot earlier than many people thought based on their blocking ability. And that was when the Buccaneers selected Keefe, the blocking tight end from Minnesota. Very different players, as Brevin Spanford is a lot taller and has seen as a guy who has potential as a receiver, but he has struggled with drops. And that was very obvious this past year. There were a lot of frustrating drops, but he still managed to have 95 career receptions for 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns. Likely mid to late round guy, maybe more on the late round, but definitely a sleeper at the tight end position. The next 2 guys I have are guys that I'm mostly interested in because of the rule changes for kick returns. That being Tyrone Tracy Jr., the wide receiver, running back, returner from Purdue, previously Iowa. 5'11" guy, 209 pounds. He has over 2,000 yards from scrimmage, 15 touchdowns from scrimmage. But then he also had 17 kick returns for 428 yards and a touchdown. That's over 25 yards per return. And then he also averaged over 6 yards per carry in 2023. So he has that explosiveness, that shiftiness. I believe he had the second fastest 3-cone drill amongst his position. So that's a guy who I wouldn't be too interested in as a wide receiver / running back, especially with guys that Minnesota already has. But the value he brings as a returner makes me wonder how high he's going to get drafted. Is he going to be 4th or 5th round pick? I doubt we're going to see him go undrafted, which, I mean, who knows? But then another guy who adds return value is Beanie Bishop, the cornerback from West Virginia. He's undersized as a corner because he's 5'10", 184. But he was still an All-American in 2023, led the nation in pass breakups, was West Virginia's 3rd leading tackler, led them with 4 interceptions. But the value there is with his return game. He's returned only 2 punts for 82 yards and a touchdown. He has 36 kick returns for 868 yards, which is averaging 24 yards per return. I think that value as a returner is what gets him drafted. But there is still that upside as a corner, despite being 5'10", as he was one of the better corners on paper this past year. And then lastly, I have Kamani Vidal, the running back from Troy. 5'8", 213-pound ball of muscle. Reminds me of like Doug Martin, Damian Pierce.
Muscle.
He was 3rd team All-American this year and the Sun Belt Offensive Player of the Year. 2022, he ran for 1,100 yards and 10 touchdowns. This past year, he ran for 1,600 yards, 14 touchdowns. He's averaged 4.9 yards per carry the previous year and then 5.6 yards per carry this past year. So a guy who did play lower competition level in the Sun Belt, but has shown that he can run angry, which is what got me excited about Damian Pierce. hasn't entirely planned out how it looked like it was going to early on, but there's still potential there. And there's still potential for Kamani Vidal as a late round draft pick.
There you go, folks. So when all these players become Hall of Famers 20 years from now, we're gonna go back on this moment right here. No, that's great. I definitely do appreciate that. A lot of times people get caught up in mainly in the first round, deservedly so, as it should be, right? But
Mm-hmm.
oh, I mean, how many times do we say the teams are built on the day two, day three drafts? You know, and these are a lot of these guys are going to come into play, and those are the ones we're going to be talking about. Making the highlight plays, the all pros, and being those unsung heroes on the teams in the future. So, um, anyways, Caleb, thank you for coming on as always. And this is like I said, one of my favorite times of the year, and I always appreciate having your insight on things and seeing how similar or different we can. You're pretty similar this year for the most part. Pretty
Oh
on
yeah.
pretty on par. But is there anything that you want to plug? Anything that you want to mention? Obviously, MSP Athletics is a pretty big thing that you got going on, but feel free to throw out whatever you'd like there.
Oh, that's about it. Follow him at MSP Athletics on
There you
Twitter.
go.
Um, Go Timberwolves, especially against the Nuggets, if the Nuggets can make it that far. No, I'm hoping for a Western Conference final with the two of us. That would be elite.
Yeah, I know.
Um,
Whichever one of those teams win, if that were to happen, I think the either one of us will probably be shutting off our phone for a couple weeks. That would be
at
tough.
least,
That would be tough. That would be
yes.
tough. Um, but anyways, folks, thank you for listening on. If you've stuck around this far, you're the real MVP. We certainly appreciate it. But get ready for the draft on Thursday. It's going to be a great time. And hopefully we've been able to open your mind a little bit to some different players, get you a better insight on things. That's certainly the goal. But anyways, folks, as for myself and Caleb Sipe, until next time, we are out.